Laura Warren Gross, the librarian at Maple Street.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Hampton. I'm the 6th grade English teacher, also at Maple Street. And you guys have just tuned into video number 3 in our book club summer series for our all middle school summer read about the Parker Inheritance by Varian Johnson. Now, we're going to jump in today and we're going to jump right into our characters, and we're going to keep going with the book. We're hoping that the rest of our middle schoolers get their book in the mail, so stay tuned to your mailbox for that book arriving in the mail. Again, it's The Parker Inheritance by Varian Johnson. We encourage you guys to go back to the Learning Hub, but also use that flyer that you found in your book and go to the Google Classroom and begin exploring, because you can go all the way back to our first video. You are not behind. You are able to jump right into what we have been talking about for the last couple weeks. Now, in The Parker Inheritance by Varian Johnson, there are tons and tons and tons of characters. So me and Mrs. Warren Gross made a character map. Now, I'm going to hold it up because you can go check out the actual image on Google Classroom, but our main character, her name is Candace. So she's our main character that we have. Her best friend and kind of like a partner in crime is Brandon, because they're going on this treasure hunt in Lambert, South Carolina. Now, Candace has Ann Miller as her mom and Joe Miller as her dad. And the other key character to kind of take away if you're just starting out the book is Abigail Caldwell. So next week, we're going to show you a character map with all of the historical characters, because this book kind of does time travel, where it jumps forward in time to the present, and then it goes all the way back to the past. And we have some more information about that, that history that we've provided through our Google Classroom. I would love, Ms. Warren Gross, we should probably show that bit of history, shouldn't we, with our timeline? So let me cue it up.
So you remember that we created this timeline, and it's completely interactive. It includes real events from history. It includes some court cases that affected those events from history. And then it also includes events from the book. So it's really important to kind of see that they're all in different colors. The real historical events starting back in the 1800s are in black. And a lot of them have videos or articles or podcasts linked to them. So when you click them, they're interactive and you can learn more. And then as you scroll forward, you'll see the red is the court cases, which changed the way that we do business in this country. Thank goodness. And then you'll see that we are starting to add in green events. And on those meets, when we meet with you at 11:30 after this video releases, you're going to help us add those green events from the book into our timeline so we can see where the book fits into history and how those events that were happening around the time make a difference to this book. So for example, in chapter 1, we're going to be at 2007. And Mrs. Hampton's going to scroll forward to that. And you'll see that in 2007, we found Abigail Caldwell digging up the tennis courts in Lambert, South Carolina. She's the city manager, and she decides she's going to go ahead and dig those up. So if you've read chapter 1, which we read out loud, you'll see that that's what happens. And then we move forward to present day, and Candace has moved for the summer to Lambert, South Carolina, and meets Brandon, the neighbor across the street. So that's sort of what happened in chapters 1 and 2. We're hoping that you've already read that. Now we're going to jump forward, and we're going to take the opportunity to read chapters 3 and 4 with you.
Yep. And also, I love this historical timeline that we made, Mrs. Warren Gross, because sometimes people really love learning about history. And sometimes history can come off like it's boring or dry or not interesting. And there's so much different history here, because if we look, it goes all the way from 1845 all the way up into the present, which a lot of different events are current events that you guys are living through now. So definitely click on those links and get interested in history, because all of that history is going to be really important to understanding the mystery in the book. Now, we are going to jump on in to chapter 3 and 4. I'm going to urge you guys that if you've already read chapters 3 and 4, maybe take a second to review chapters 3 and 4 with us, because I know when I read this book, Mrs. Warren Gross, I found all sorts of clues that I did not catch the first time when we read this book the first time. And so maybe review chapters 3 and 4, or you can take this part of the video as you kind of listen to us read the next couple chapters to maybe go look at that timeline or do some exploring of the history so that you understand what's going on in that time period. So if you have your book with you, we're on page 10. So chapter 3, page 10. And then Mrs. Warren Ghost, you're going to read chapter 4 after me, and we're just reading the next couple chapters because the next video that you guys see, we're going to jump way ahead and we're going to kind of hope that you are with us and reading and checking out that reading schedule that we put on Google Classroom so you can follow along with us. Remember, that reading schedule is not about grades or a check-in or a pass or not pass. That reading schedule is just to make sure we don't spoil anything so you know what's coming. So again, chapter 3, page 10, The Parker Inheritance by Varian Johnson. Here we go. A few minutes later, Candace returned to her room to change clothes. Her mother had suggested they grab lunch at a Lambert landmark, and then she'd finally take Candace to the library, but not in those holy jeans, her mother had said. As happy as Candace was about finding new books and spending time with her mom, she was also worried about her, specifically about her mom's looming writing deadlines. Her mother was a romance novelist. Jane Harris, Roberta Caldwell, Amanda Sandstone. She had written books under those names and plenty of others. She always said she wanted to take a break from romance assignments to write her Anne C. Miller novel, which, P.S., that's her real name if you remember from the character map. But with the house sale dragging on, she'd signed up for 3 more projects, all with deadlines that would have been hard to meet even if she'd been writing nonstop. But she wasn't writing, seemingly at all. Instead, she watched a lot of reality television, visited Miss Jones across the street, and took long walks around the neighborhood. As Candace searched her dresser for a more suitable pair of jeans, she heard her mother in the kitchen speaking on the phone in hushed tones. It was another reminder of how much smaller Grandma's house was compared to their place in Atlanta. Candace had always wondered if her parents had moved into the 5-bedroom house thinking they'd have a lot of kids and if they were disappointed when it ended up being only her. Well, look who's outside, her mother said breezily as they stepped out of the house 10 minutes later. We should say hello. Across the street, Mrs. Jones and her son sat on the porch reading. Candace's mother had been encouraging her to walk over and introduce herself to the boy, but Candace hadn't seen the point. She would be back in Atlanta in 2 months. Why make friends when she was just going to leave? Plus, he was only 11 years old. She didn't like hanging out with boys her own age, much less boys who were a year younger. Hey, Juanita, Brandon, her mother said. We're off to grab a bite of lunch at PJ's and pop into the library. Care to join us? I just ate, Miss Jones said before turning to her son. But Brandon hasn't had lunch. What do you say? Want to tag along with Candace and Miss Miller? No, thank you, he replied. He didn't look up from his magazine. Maybe you didn't hear her, Mrs. Jones said. She's going to the library, too. Brandon glanced up. How long will you be there? Brandon, don't be rude, his mother snapped. No, he's fine, Candace's mother said. We'll be there for a while, I imagine. I've been promising to take Candace since we moved here. Today seems like a good day as any. Brandon and his mother stared at each other. It was clear that their eyes were having a private, silent conversation. I definitely have had those conversations where I can look at somebody and be like, what are we talking about? He closed his magazine. Let me grab my wallet, he said, sounding defeated. Mrs. Jones smiled and motioned for him to stay. How about I treat? She rose from her chair. Let me grab my purse. I'll be back in a second. She entered the house. No one spoke for a few seconds. I heard you were an author, Brandon finally said to Candace's mother, breaking the silence. He had a short body and skinny legs. His high tops kept brushing against the porch as he rocked in his chair. Are you writing anything now? His voice was softer than it had been a moment before. Her mom fiddled with a clasp on her watch. Just a few projects, nothing serious. Are they scary? Brandon asked. Or is it a romance like your other? They're secret, Candace said, crossing her arms. Her mother didn't like talking about her books with people, at least not when she was in the middle of writing them. It was one of her many superstitions when it came to work. Brandon, your mom told me you're a pretty hardcore reader, her mother said. What type of books do you like? A little bit of everything, Brandon said. I guess I like boy books. What does that even mean? Candace wanted to ask. Books about guns and war? Books that contain only boys? Who are your favorite authors? Her mother continued. Brandon stopped rocking. I don't know, maybe Stephen King, James Patterson? He glanced at Candace and hesitated. Then he looked at his lap. You know, authors like that. Candace realized she was giving him a look. I like Stephen King and James Patterson as well, her mother said. Candace reads a little bit of everything too, she said. Have you read anything new this summer, Candace? Candace shook her head. Her mother knew she hadn't read anything new. That was why they were going to the library. Look at us, a big group of word nerds, her mother said, her grin much too wide. Candace frowned at her mother. Why was she trying to force a conversation when it was clear neither she nor Brandon wanted to talk? After thinking about it for a bit, Candace realized what was going on. This had all been a setup to get her and Brandon to spend more time together. Candace was sure his mom was in on it too. Was Brandon? It didn't matter. She already had Dee Dee and Courtney back in Atlanta. She didn't need any other friends, especially not 11-year-old book snobs. Now, Mrs. Warren Gross, I'm wondering what you think. Do you think there are girl books and boy books?
I do not. I think there are everyone books. I don't think it matters if it has boy characters, girl characters. I think I like to read a book because I like the story. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't think there are boy books and girl books. And I think that idea kind of happened for the past when people were trying to get people like interested in books maybe. But I don't think there are girl books and boy books anymore. I think there's just books that have different stories to tell from different point of views and perspectives. Mm-hmm. So it'd be interesting to know from you guys when you come to our Google Classroom, whether or not you guys think there are boy books or girl books. I can't wait to find out what happens in chapter 4. Let's find out.
All right, here we go. Chapter 4, starting on page 14. Candace's father used to always complain about their house in Atlanta, the uneven garage, the creaky stairs, and the backyard that flooded every time there was a downpour. As they neared PJ's, Candace realized their house could have been much, much worse. Some of the buildings in this neighborhood, her mother had called it Vista Heights, looked like they'd topple over with one good gust of wind. Every other window had bars across its frame. She checked to make sure her mother's doors were locked. She didn't know where she and her mom would live when they moved back to Atlanta, but it wouldn't be in their old neighborhood. All the houses were too big for 2 people and way too expensive. There was no way their new neighborhood could be as rough as this, could it? Brandon remained quiet during the trip. When they pulled into the parking lot, Candace unfastened her seatbelt and snuck a peek behind her. Brandon's door was unlocked. They entered PJ's and walked to the counter. Old black and white pictures hung on the walls as weathered wooden shoe shine stand sat on the corner, collecting dust. The few people inside the restaurant stared at them. It was like the regulars could tell they didn't belong.
I'm sorry to interrupt, Ms. Warren Gross, but I have to point out PJ's, and I didn't realize this until just now, just a second. But PJ's in this old-timey picture is actually on the front cover. Like what you're reading about, and kind of that picture with the shoe shine and like everything else. And I didn't notice like the differences in color and that PJ's was on that front cover. So sorry to interrupt you, but I had to point that out.
That's okay. And that's an interesting clue for something that we see later. So I like that. The daily special for me, Candace's mother said after staring at the menu for a few seconds. Candace, chicken fingers and fries. She had ruled out the special as soon as she'd read the menu. She hated fish with bones, and there was no way she was eating jalapeno and green onion hush puppies. Brandon ordered the hamburger and began to slide some money across the counter. Candace's mother stopped him. Boy, quit and put that up, she said, and she handed over a credit card. My mom said, it's fine, her mother said. We're neighbors. Despite her mother trying her best to facilitate a real conversation, they ate their food, surprisingly good, Candace noted, as quickly as they could, and they headed to the library. While Candace and her mother filled out forms for their library cards, Brandon bolted upstairs to the children's section, not bothering to wait for them. It ticked Candace off, but only for a second, because with him out of the way, she could pick out the books she wanted without him judging her. The boys at her old school were silly that way, always making fun of whatever she and her friends read. Once upstairs, Candace walked up and down the aisles, pausing every few steps to pick up a book and inspect its cover. After making her way through the children's section, she moved to the teen books. She spotted Brandon sitting against the shelf with his knees pressed up against his chest. His face was literally buried in a book. She took a step closer to see what he was reading. Maybe he heard her because he snapped the book shut and stuffed it behind his back. Were you looking for me? Is it time to go? Candace shook her head. We'll probably be here for a while. Mom hasn't been to the library since we got to Lambert. It's like she stepped back into Narnia. You read The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe? Candace felt herself smirking. I read all 7 books in the series. She almost added, even though I'm a girl, but decided against it. I've never finished them. They're always checked out. I wanted to read them in order. She wondered if he was talking about publication order or chronological order, but asking seemed too hoity-toity. What you should read is the dark is rising sequence, or the hero on the crown, or the blue sword. She shrugged. I mean, maybe you wouldn't like those last 2 because the main characters are girls, but I love those books. He sat up taller, and Aaron is one of my favorite characters. Neither one spoke for a few seconds. He reached behind him and placed his fingers on the spine of his book, but he didn't pull it out. What are you reading? Candace asked. Is it another fantasy? It's nothing. His hand slid away from the book. Obviously, it wasn't nothing. Candace wondered if he was hiding the book because he didn't want her making fun of him. She hadn't realized it was a possibility right up until then. Do you come here a lot? Candace asked. She used to always talk about books with her mom, but that seemed to be happening less and less with everything else going on in their lives. Tori used to bring me during the school year, but the timing hasn't worked out so well this summer. It took her a moment to remember that Tori was his older sister. Her mom had mentioned it a while back. Can you ride your bike here? She readjusted her shoulder bag. It's not that far from your house. Mom doesn't want me riding by myself. Candace thought about this. Once she was sure of her answer, she said, I'm sure Mom and I will be spending a lot of time here this summer. I bet we could give you a ride the next time we come. He blinked at her. At home, when I said I read Stephen King and James Patterson, you looked like you wanted to reach out and knock me upside the head. Now she was the one that sounded like a snob. It's just, I don't think there's such a thing as boy books or girl books. I think there are people books. At least that's what Mom always said when Dad complained about what I was reading. I'm surprised she didn't say anything at your house. She was probably being polite, he said. Anyway, sorry about the way I was acting on our porch. I was kind of mad that our moms were forcing us to meet. I didn't know what they were planning until right before you walked over. Candace smiled. At least she wasn't the only one being manipulated. Don't parents do that, Mrs. Hampton? All the time. So sneaky.
I feel like parents do that a lot, where maybe they have plans that don't necessarily align with your plans all the time. And even though like parents have good intentions, maybe they don't necessarily always match what you want or think you want in that instance. It's kind of an interesting situation.
Agree. So how many books did you have in the bag? In your bag, he continued. You're only allowed to check out 10 at a time. I don't know. I stopped counting at 15. She pulled some books out of her bag. I'd better return these. Wait, maybe we could share. You check out 10, and I'll check out 10. He pulled the book out from behind his back. Have you read Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. After an hour, Candace headed to the computer lab downstairs. Her desktop computer crashed right before they moved, but Candace's mom wanted to wait until fall before buying her a new one, which was easy for her mom since she had her own laptop. Candace was forced to check her email on her mom's phone all summer. A man sat at the desk in the front of the room. Sign up here, he said, nodding toward the notebook. Since we're so busy, we're limiting internet usage to 20 minutes per person. Once she was called up, she quickly made her way to the computer. After logging in, she checked her email. No new messages. She was about to go to her favorite puzzle website next, but she paused. She rubbed her grandmother's bracelet and then typed, Abigail Caldwell plus Lambert plus fired. The screen filled with all kinds of links. The first articles were all about how her grandmother had been fired after digging up the tennis court at Vickers Park. The residents were really mad, especially since it seemed like the city didn't have the funds to quickly repair the court. Further down the page was a link to an editorial written in the Lambert Trader by a Black City Council member who talked about how much of a disappointment her grandmother was to the African American community. Instead of positively showing what a Black woman could do as city manager, the politician wrote, Abigail Caldwell's inept and incompetent actions have set back racial progress at least 30 years. Since Candace quickly closed the webpage without finishing the article. Maybe her grandmother had made a mistake, a huge mistake. But that still didn't give that man the right to talk about her like that. She was sure her grandmother had done good things as city manager too. Candace's time ran out before she could summon the courage to read any more articles. The man at the desk told her she could sign up again and get back in the waiting line, but she decided against it. Candace found her mother hoping she was ready to go, but her Mom was furiously scribbling in a yellow notepad with piles of books surrounding her at a table. 30 more minutes, her mom said, not looking up. Can't break the flow. She didn't know what her mother had found in the stacks, but it looked like something had kick-started her writing. Candace started back up the stairs, but stopped halfway when she saw Brandon heading toward her. Hey, I was coming down to find you, he said. Already finished? Yeah, I'm done with the internet for the day, she said. Then she rubbed her arms. It's kind of cold in here. I'm going to sit outside. Cool, I'll come with you, he said. I mean, if that's okay. She shrugged. Fine by me. They checked out their books and walked outside. An ice cream truck played Pop Goes the Weasel in the distance. They sat down on the bench. Candace slowly popped her knuckles. She could still see that see that stupid editorial in her head. Did you know my grandmother? She finally blurted out. Brandon looked up from his book. I only moved to Lambert 3 years ago, but Granddad knew her pretty well. He's lived here for like 20 years. He moved here after he retired. Candace wondered what Brandon's grandfather thought of her grandma. Did he see her as a disgrace? A failure? Do you know where Vickers Park is? She asked. Are there, tennis courts there? Brandon stuck a finger in his book to save his place. Is this about your grandmother getting fired from her job with the city? Candace's shoulders sank. How did you know about that? I thought you just moved here. As my granddad says, word travels fast and lingers long in the South. He said she got a raw deal. He shifted on the bench. Vickers Park is in Vista Heights, not too far from PJ's. Candace rifled through her bag, trying to decide what to read, then glanced at Brandon. He had returned to his book, his mouth moving a little as he read line by line. She couldn't tell what he had opened, but it wasn't the Judy Blume one. As at his suggestion, she checked out all the books with girl main characters, and he checked out the books featuring boys. She kept her mouth shut, this time. Hey, I'm sorry. Can I ask you another question? She asked. He looked up again. Do you know why she was fired? He wrinkled his nose. The rumor is that she thought something was hidden underneath the court. So much for confidentiality. She decided to press further. And, do you know what she was looking for? No, but maybe Mom or Granddad knows. When I get home, I can ask. That's okay, Candace said quickly. Her mom was right. She didn't want to talk to anyone else about her grandmother's hunt for buried treasure, especially other adults. She didn't want to make Grandma's reputation worse. Really, he said, just forget it. It all sounded too silly, especially now that she was talking to him about someone other than her mother. About it now with someone other than her mother. She could see why her grandmother lost her job. I totally feel stupid even bringing it up. Sure thing, he said. Then, almost 5 minutes later, while still looking at his book, he said, For what it's worth, I don't think you're stupid. I mean, stupid people don't read all 5 books in the Dark is Rising sequence, right? He paused and then added, I bet stupid people don't even call it a sequence. Candace waited for him to continue, but he just flipped the page and went back to reading. She smiled. Brandon was a book snob, but maybe that wasn't such a bad thing after all.
So I feel like we're gonna jump in and find out what happens next. So just so you know, guys, we're again hoping that this week and next week you're able to get your book and dive into reading. The first chunk of pages that we're going to talk about in our meeting next week, next Tuesday, are pages 1 to 95. And so we want to make sure that we also included information about a secret letter that Candace is going to find in the attic. Now, just forewarning, this does not spoil anything if you just got your book or if you haven't gotten to that point so far in chapter 6. But me and Mrs. Warren Gross wanted to share some questions that we may have had the first and second time we read through this letter. So in chapter 6, as you're reading more, on page 29, so chapter 6, page 29, and we're not going to read the full chapter because we want you to find out how she finds the letter. But if you have already read this, again, we urge you to go back and find the clues and see what you now know. But if you haven't read this, we're going to go over the letter and kind of ask some questions to get you thinking as we go over this, because the letter is the key to everything. It helps. It's like a map. It's like a treasure map. So she's in the attic. So Candace is in the attic and she finds a small note. On the outside are these words. Find the path. I'm going to hold my book up. Solve the puzzle. Find the path. solve the puzzle. And so on page 29, it says August 10th, 2007, dear Miss Caldwell. And so 2007 would be 13 years ago from today. So we're sort of in the past, but not, it's like the recent past. Here is the letter, and I'm going to start it, and we'll do some pausing and thinking as we go. August 10th, 2007. Dear Miss Caldwell, page 29. I write to you on behalf of the Washington family. I'm sure you've never met them. How could you? The Allen boys ran them out of Lambert long before you arrived in the city, and when the Washingtons appealed for justice, city officials denied them at every turn. Enoch, Leanne, and Siobhan Washington became the newest victims of the city's long-standing discrimination against Black people. I love Siobhan, and that is why I spent 30 years destroying the Allens, step by step. Now, let's pause and kind of think there. Those are lots of names. What names stuck out to you, Mrs. Warren Gross?
So Enoch, Leanne, and Siobhan Washington, it says, became the newest victims. And then it talks about the Allens. So that sounds like two different groups of people to me, and two different sort of families, maybe.
And we've covered in our previous videos the present day characters, and I haven't said an Enoch or a Leanne or a Siobhan. So these are probably characters from the past because we're writing a letter from the past. But so in our next video, stay tuned because we'll do a character map and give you even more clues about those historical characters. Now, the letter goes on to say that this person, whoever's writing the letter, spent 30 years destroying the Allens, step by step. My first strike was physical, and then I wrecked them financially. I was the majority owner of the corporation that bought out Allen Textiles. I purchased Solara Industries simply so I could move their plant out of Lambert, ruining the Allens' land lease. My goal was to wreak havoc, not only on the Allens, but the entire city. It seemed fitting. Now, the first time I read this letter, what did they do? Because he is destroying them. And I know lots of words with like leases and finances and everything, Mrs. Warren Gross, but I immediately thought, I was like, what did they do that was so bad of destroying them?
Yeah, to me too, that was like, wow, if you must have done something terrible for someone to come for you this hard. That is all the crazy.
Well, and not just one person, but all of them. Like he wanted Allens, plural, that whole family gotta go.
Plus the whole city. Not even just the Allens, the whole city.
That's a good point, the whole city. All right, I'm on page 30. But Siobhan Washington still cared for Lambert. She asked me to show compassion. So Siobhan knows the author of our letter somehow. Unlike her father, unlike me, she believed in the balance of justice and forgiveness. And even now, 7 years after her death, I cannot deny her. Now, this idea of justice and forgiveness. So she said, unlike she believed in the balance of justice and forgiveness. What do you think that means, Ms. Warren Gross?
So not only are we willing to sort of seek out justice and sort of make sure things are evened out, but also we need to forgive the people who have done us wrong. And I think that's an interesting thing because we'll see that theme throughout this book. When we look back at the historical events, we have to talk about sort of making sure that things are right for people, but at the same time, being able to move on and live our lives and not always be worried about, getting even.
Yeah. Now we're about to get some clues. Here we go. We're jumping in. Thus, I have created an opportunity for Lambert to earn back everything I took from the city, a fortune totaling $40 million at my last reckoning. I've created a puzzle mystery that will take you deep into the city's past. The person who finds this inheritance, Parker Inheritance, look at the title, inheritance will receive 1/10 of the money. The remainder will be allocated to the city. In return, the winner must share what he or she learns through the puzzle with the world. Your first clue, 1. Siobhan's father loved tennis, but he grew up idolizing a team in another sport. What do you think, Ms. Warren Gross?
So definitely an interest in tennis, but we need to look deeper than just tennis is what it sounds like to me, which is interesting because Abigail Caldwell read this, and what did she do in 2007?
Dug up the tennis courts.
Right. She went straight for tennis. Interesting.
So interesting. I wonder baseball, basketball. What I guess I would have to also look up like football. I'd have to look up the history behind sports too to maybe understand and try to find those clues. Here we go. I wish you'd had a chance to meet Siobhan and her parents. Siobhan was amazing, but her mother was too. Leanne Washington's days as a volunteer at her church did more for Lambert's children than most people will ever know. I wonder if that's a clue, if Leanne is a clue with the church.
It's interesting because he mentions both Leanne and her mom, so you never know. You got to keep an eye on them.
Yep. Like her mother, Siobhan believed in giving people second chances, or in my case, 3. She was truly greater than the sum of her parts. Beautiful, smart, educated, compassionate. She loved laughter and literature and math, and she was beauty personified on the tennis courts. Easily talented enough to thrive on the collegiate and national levels. But because she loved me more, she chose to give it up. Interesting. Oh, I feel like that's a clue. Because she loved me more.
Loved me more, yeah.
She
or
chose
this person is, they must have had some sort of relationship.
She was everything a poor, simple boy like me could hope for. She loved all. Black, white, rich, poor. She loved Lambert despite what it did to her and her father. I wonder what it did to her.
Yeah, I'm curious too.
She loved me even after I became a ghost of my former self. Now I have all the questions. What does he mean? Or what does that mean?
What happened to him that changed him as well, or this person if it's a him? What happened?
Yeah, a ghost of my former self. Here lies your challenge. Last part. Siobhan is the key, the one who will lead you to my fortune. She is the only reason you're getting this opportunity. Do not squander it. I have sent similar versions of this letter to the mayor, the school district superintendent, the chair of the school board, and the editor of the Lambert Trader. Your predecessors failed to protect the Washington family at great cost. This is your chance to make right what once went so utterly wrong. This is your chance to create a better world for your grandchild. But do not delay. These clues, like Siobhan, will not be of this world forever.
So that's the beginning, right? When we get the letter from this person, we don't know who the person is, and we get all these clues. And then from here, Candace and Brandon have to decide, are they going to follow the clues and solve the mystery?
And I would find a little scrap of paper or a sticky note, like I have my little sticky notes here. I would find a little scrap and mark page 29 because I found myself, as I was getting more clues throughout the story, coming back to the letter to see if I could figure out more information. So again, guys, we're hoping that you are reading pages 1 to 95 because next week on Tuesday, after our video gets posted at 11:30, we will be available to chat about the book, and we are going to talk about pages 1 to 95. And that video, and then the video after that will be 96 to 245. So we're really going to ramp up our reading after we're done with our next video. Anything else I'm forgetting, Miss Warren Gross?
I think that's all. Make sure to check into our Google Classroom. We're going to be posting lists of read-alikes. So if you like a mystery and you finish this one, there'll be some lists on mysteries. If you're interested in history, there'll be some history books that are historical fiction. If you like books that are about segregation and civil rights, there's going to be lists for that too. So please take the time to check in our Google Classroom, look at the schedule, look at the timeline, look at the recommended book lists, and also definitely come to our meets and get to know us. We're excited to be doing this with you this summer.
Yeah, thank you guys for tuning in for video number 3. We will see you next week. Bye, guys.
Bye. Have a good week.